goal is to raise about $30 million specifically in scholarships and emergency aid just for this student population. And one of the things we want to do with that is actually research what's the best way you can deploy financial aid, emergency aid, and support to really help these students be successful. So we are inviting people. If you go to nu.edu/Anders, you can find all the information about the Anders campaign and the kind of work we're doing.
Hello and welcome to our guests, our listeners from around the world. And this is our Edu Unlocked podcast with me, your host, Ashish Fernando. This is a podcast about people in higher education, not necessarily the leaders at an institution, but the people who are behind that leadership. And joining us today is one such amazing and inspirational leader. Please welcome Dr. Mark Milliron, the President and CEO of National University, to our podcast. Dr. Mark Milliron, welcome.
Ashish, thank you so much for the invitation to join the conversation.
Fantastic. So let me get this started. This was like, if I had to give Mark's bio, this would take us 15 minutes. So I'm going to try and do my
Your
best.
kind way of saying I can't keep a job. That's great.
No, it's just the amazing things you've done, and I was kind of thinking, and I was like, what if higher education were designed forward rather than backward from the academic calendar of, oh yeah, we got to finish our calendar at this point. What if it was designed forward from the lives that people actually live, like work, family, military service? I feel like you are one of the people who really thinks in that direction, and you're building that future at scale. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. So, for our listeners, I just wanted to quickly introduce Dr. Milliron. He's currently serving as the president and CEO at National University. That is San Diego's largest private nonprofit university. And it's home to the Anders, is how everyone lovingly likes to call students who get enrolled there. And the definition is pretty powerful. It's students who refuse to choose between two things that matter, be it career, be it kids, be it caregiving, service, learning. It's students who say it's not about the or, it's about the and. And I love that way of approaching education. We're going to talk about that with Mark today. But Mark's path to NU is not just a typical person who's become a president today. He's been creating impact on a large scale with some large institutions. He's been the senior vice president, executive dean of the nation's largest teachers college, as it was called, Western Governors University, a founding chancellor of WGU Texas, which is Western Governors University, Texas, co-founder and chief learning officer at Civitas Learning. A lot of you all know Civitas already. And then he was also at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as the deputy director of post-secondary success, apart from a lot of other things he's done in life. And that's what brings that whole value chain forward into national, and that whole concept of the and. So Mark, let's start with that. Let's talk about building an and world of learners, with all the promises, the perils, and the good things around AI that are coming, and all the things that are happening. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think, Ashish, our conversation around the Anders is really around this basic concept that to serve students, you have to see students, right? And to serve all students, you have to see all students. And an unfortunate reality in most of higher education around the world, actually, is that it is highly focused on kind of right from primary, secondary school, 18 to 20-year-olds, and their kind of first pathway through, where folks are primarily a student. That's what they are. And they tend to be folks who are highly resourced and highly supported. And God bless them. Like, I don't hold anything against folks who have that kind of pathway. And some of my own kids have gone on that kind of pathway, and that's great. But one of the things that's pretty clear is that the fastest growing population in the world of higher education are students who have more complicated lives. They're people who are students and employees. They are students and parents. They are students and working in military service. They increasingly elder care. And the realization that higher education is just not built for them. And I think we've gotten better over the decades, but we're at a moment where seeing the Anders, seeing students who are embracing the and, it makes you, it's a design challenge. So if you're into design thinking, it's the idea of beginning with empathy, really understanding those life situations and saying, can we enter in the and design using the tools, technologies, policies, and practices we have at hand? What would higher education look like if we designed for that student population and help them be successful? Because that population is a pretty important population.
Yeah.
If you just get your arms around it, in the United States, there are about 43 million people who have some college and no credential. The vast majority of them tried and left in good academic standing, but if you survey them, if you go into the research, we saw this at the Bill and
Mhm.
Melinda Gates Foundation, most of them left because life happened.
Yeah.
And part of the challenge is 5 classes over 16 weeks, which is a standard pattern in higher ed in the US in particular, over the course of 4 years is a hard model, especially Monday through Thursday, 8 to 2 p.m. is not the model that works for these folks. So the
Yeah.
National University, for example, was specifically built for that. And I can give you a little bit of the founding story which really resonates with me. National University was founded by a Navy captain PhD who was really heartbroken watching service members coming out of the Vietnam War and not being able to use their GI Bill resources because traditional education, it wasn't because they didn't care about it wasn't built for them. And
Mm.
because they were Anders, they were often either active duty or veteran, but parents and working, they needed something more flexible. And that's where the idea, Dr. David Chigos and a group of former officers kind of went to the accrediting group and accrediting agencies in the Western states and said, hey, we want to build something that is specifically built for the student population. And it was considered a kind of a crazy idea. That wasn't a thing back then. Fast forward 54 years, now we serve about 50,000 students a year in our degree programs, another 80,000 in our workforce training programs. About a third of our students are doctoral, about a third are masters, a third are bachelors. Average age of our undergrad is 33, average age of our masters is 37, average age of our doctoral is 42. About 50% of our undergrad are still active duty military or spouse dependent. But the neatest thing is 100% of our students are Anders. They are students with these kind of complicated lives. So we are completely dedicated to creating models, again, using the technologies, the techniques, the policies, the practices that help these students learn well, finish strong, launch effectively. And these are rock stars. I mean, our graduates have gone on. The CEO of Hertz is one of our graduates. The CEO of DirecTV is one of our graduates. The CEO of Herdez Salsa, of Herdez Food, which is like the largest kind of food distributor in Mexico, is our graduate. So these folks can be very successful. They're very motivated, and they're growing. It's a big sector of
Mm.
higher ed, so we're pretty committed to it. I personally have been on a journey trying to open up access and excellence options for the Ander population for my entire career. So it's really fun being in a place like Nashville.
Love that. Love that story, and a few keywords that you mentioned just resonate. So I wanna talk about that. You said it's the design thinking approach and empathy is key. How with about 50,000 degree students, 80,000 workforce learners nationwide, how do you scale operationally while also keeping empathy and that at the core of it, and it's online and you have students all over, so I'm really curious to know your thoughts
Yeah,
there.
and we're not all online. We're about 75% fully online, about 25% hybrid and on ground. It
Okay.
depends on the program. It depends on the family of services you're trying to provide. If you're doing clinicals, I mean, for example, we're the largest teachers college in California. We train the most teachers in the state. And part of the reason that works so well is especially for working teachers who want to get their masters in RISE, like they don't want to stop work. They want to keep going. So we actually provide a model that really works for them. And our founding design was the idea of doing 4-week courses and the idea of students taking one course at a time. I mean, this is way pre-internet. Our high-end technology back then was a cassette recorder, right? But the idea is, can you create a model that works for them? And the idea of somebody who's raising kids and working full-time, taking 5 courses over 16 weeks doesn't work. But taking one
Yeah.
course at a time, a month at a time, that's a cognitive load balance where suddenly instead of having to add 5 courses over 16 weeks and having to deal with all the flexibility issues of driving everywhere and keeping up with classes, designing a model that is 4 weeks intense and focused, boy, our students love it. And they love being able, and they can absolutely succeed at the same rates and the same success levels at institutions, at traditional institutions, because it's designed for them. And again, and the real innovation there is just balancing cognitive load, allowing people to focus on something really deeply and then kind of going from thing to thing. It's not the same as a traditional institution. And I know that people have a lot of faith and belief in that kind of like 16-week model, but I think that's being challenged by a lot of people now. Fast forward, into the 90s, and suddenly we started dabbling with leveraging the internet. By the 2000s, we were deep into using online learning and hybrid learning. Post COVID, we flipped from about 50% online to almost now 75-80% online. And our students are really voting with their feet. Their ability to kind of learn at their own pace and space in a way where they are engaged deeply, held to high standards. Our academic outcomes are amazing. We're classified by the Carnegie ACE Carnegie classifications as a professions-focused undergraduate, graduate, doctoral large. But that's not what's interesting. What's interesting is they just started in the last year rating institutions based on access and earnings. And if you're a high access institution, you're very flexible, low cost. People can get in. If you're a low access, you're generally highly selective, right? Super costly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they rate earnings 8 to 10 years out. You can either be low, medium, or high. We're one of there's 4,000 institutions of higher ed in the United States. We're one of only 400 that are considered an OCU, which is an opportunity college or university, which is we are high on access and we're high on earnings, which means our students do incredibly well after they leave. And we think that shining a light on that kind of institution is really important. And again, I want to make sure I'm clear. This is not about a better than conversation. I love state universities, love community colleges, research universities. They're great. They're doing really important work. This is not about a better than conversation. This is a better with conversation. We think our country, we think the world is probably better with more flexible models for the Ander population. It just takes some intentionality around it. And it's not about, hey, let's do what we already do at night. This is about a deeper design kind of opportunity.
Love that. Love that, Mark. A lot of that, I think, also stems, like, just from you personally, stems from sort of your background and where you've come from. I've heard that story a couple of times when I was listening to you while you were on stage, and that whole balance of how do you impart education, how do you scale an institution, but also keep mission in mind, keep the and in mind.
Yeah.
Talk to our listeners a little bit about your background, because it's, I think, really inspiring.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to my background in 1 second, but I want to make sure one thing is really important. Um, I think it's really important for people who are innovating in the world of higher education. I don't think you scale first. I think you focus on being really good at serving who you're trying to serve. So our goal at National is not to be big. Our goal at National is to be a great university, helping our students learn incredibly well, finish strong, and launch effectively. And our theory of work is if you do it well enough, students will tell other students. And that's worked really well for us. I mean, we grew about 14% last year. You're seeing a lot of kind of energy in this space, but our goal is not growth. Our goal is to be really good at providing high quality education. And we always say you want to be good to grow, like if you're getting there. So I just want to make sure I'm clarifying that. This is not about being a mega university. This is about being a really high quality, impactful.
Totally understand. And so would you say a lot of that growth then has come from a lot of word of mouth, just students being successful and getting out there and telling their families, friends?
Yeah, completely. I think what happens is Anders talk, right? And there's a couple of things. Again, to serve all students, you have to see all students. When people feel seen, they feel connected to, they feel valued. It's amazing how they suddenly feel at home. And it's like, we hear this all the time from our students. Like they feel like, oh, this institution was built for me. This is exactly what I
Mm.
needed. And it's meeting them at the right time in the right way. And by the way, you can challenge students at a very high level to exceed academically. It does not mean you have to sacrifice quality. It's a false choice. What you want to do is create a model that really works for these folks again, so they can weave education into their lives. And what you see is these folks are hard chargers, they're risers, they're really trying to be successful. And if you do this work well, you enable them to kind of launch their lives in all kinds of really exciting ways. And it's not about them bending themselves to a traditional institution. It's about them finding an institution that works for them.
Love that. I love the approach, and I've been tracking that for a little bit now that I also work with national and in some capacity. So it's been really, honestly, very refreshing to see that. A lot of people, when online started becoming a thing with Southern New Hampshire and national and Western governors and everything, there were a lot of naysayers, right? But now you're starting to see the value, like if done right, online remote education can actually really change
Yeah.
lives, and it's in the data from the last few
And it's
years.
pretty important for me to know, like National University, I always say we are not an online university. We are a university that is focused on non-traditional working and military students, full stop. And we've been doing that for 54 years, well before the internet even was a thing. And
Yeah.
we'll use whatever technology, technique, policy, practice that helps these students learn well and finish strong and launch effectively. Full stop. We're now innovating with Meta Campus. We have a metaverse campus. We're doing all kinds of virtual reality. We're leveraging AI. Whatever tools out there that's going to help our students learn more effectively and be successful in we're going to be there. So watch us in 10 years. We might be a fully metaverse university. You don't know, because obviously you just constantly have to be adapting. The idea is, what's your goal? Like, our goal is to design an educational experience for this student population that helps them be radically successful. And what's kind of cool about that is just it's a challenge for us constantly be thinking about how do we keep evolving this model in a way that really helps them.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I mean, you answered some of my questions that were going to be, I'd kept it for the end of what 10 years future is going to look like in the future. So, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting one. We'll come to that, the Metaverse University. uh, but yes, I'd love to talk about, your life a little bit, your background, and what leads you to be
Yeah.
inspiring what you're doing at National.
I have a pretty eclectic, interesting background. I come from a family of 9 kids. I actually have an African American brother, Native American brother, Korean sister. My dad was in the Navy, mom was a vocational nurse, no real knowing about higher education. Um, and when I turned about 17 years old, graduated high school, there really wasn't a lot of options for me because there wasn't the expectation that I'd be going into higher ed. But luckily for me, again, the beautiful thing about, in particular in the United States in the last 100 years, all kinds of innovation around creating more accessible models. And one of those models happens to be the community college. And for me, there was a great local community college nearby that allowed me to work while I was going to school. It was one of the earlier Ander institutions, right? And I bus tables, waited tables, and started at Mason Community College. I would not be here if it wasn't for that. That gave me the pathway to possibility. Finished at the community college, transferred to ASU, got my undergrad. Funny enough, like my mom and dad did not push us to go into higher ed because they didn't think they could afford it. They didn't think that was a reality in our kind of larger lives. But once I got a degree, my mom was like, "Well, if Mark can do it, anybody can do it. You're all getting degrees." So every kid after that, hey, we have EDDs and law degrees and accounting degrees, like everything in our family now, which is kind of funny. But it does show the transformational impact of accessibility. If you can create a high access, high quality options, you suddenly can transform lives of individuals and their larger extended families. But I went on to get my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate. Got my bachelor's and master's at ASU, and I got my doctorate at the University of Texas at Austin, and then just fell in love with education as a pathway to possibility. And then my career really has been fascinating because you would never have predicted when I walked onto campus of Mason Community College I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. I jokingly say, I literally did not know what an AA was. I didn't know what an AS was. I kind of knew what BS was, right? I was totally faking it. I was classic imposter syndrome, trying to figure it out. And the right people showed up at the right time and really helped kind of mentor and guide me because I didn't have that in my extended family. And for me, really great work being done by those institutions at Mason Community College in Arizona State that helped me get on that pathway. But once I got through my doctorate, one of the things I realized is, hey, let's be a part of the solution. Let's try to help more and more diverse students be more successful than ever before. And that became kind of a personal passion of mine. And what's been kind of fun is if you look at my pretty interesting career, which is kind of bopped between association work, government work, foundation work, institutional work, across the board, the red thread has always been What can we do to help more and more diverse students be more successful? Whether it's how do we leverage technology, how do we leverage policy, how do we leverage innovative models? I've always been a part of that conversation. Was one of the early trustees for Western Governors back when it had 50 students. I was one of the early, participants in the board for the Global Online Academy. I've always been, part of kind of stirring the pot around people thinking and innovating around different tools and technologies. Civitas learning, as you well know, is really about how can we use the data, especially the students' own data, to help them make better choices, to make sure they're kind of guiding their journey along the way. So for me, landing at National is kind of the ultimate landing spot because I'm able to put all of that together with a phenomenal team to try to help lots of students.
Love that. Love the story there, and it resonates with what you always keep saying. I've heard that also. I was researching, reading a lot about you, listening to your speeches, and you talk about get grounded, get real, get going,
Yeah.
and it's kind of how your life has been, and I'm sure what you're imparting within your team as well. Any specific examples that stand out in terms of something, an initiative where you were like, yeah, let's get real about this. It's not about boiling the ocean, like you said. It's not about doubling, tripling enrollments. It's about just doing
Yeah.
things better, getting real about it. So any examples that come to mind, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we started our work over the last 3 years, I've been at National for about 3 years. We really came together around, we did a lot of work around developing our 5 year strategic plan. And we got very grounded in a theory of change, a theory of work around how we would achieve our mission. And again, our mission is very focused on world class student experiences, in particular for non traditional working and military students. We are totally focused on that. And in the end, our grand vision, if I could summarize the very long mission statement, it basically is we want to be difference makers that are educating difference makers, right? And we're very committed to that. And our ways of work, we kind of really are anchored in this. As we do this work, we want people to see us championing student success, building trust, advancing inclusion, embracing accountability, and especially making things better. And why I love making things better is making things better can be a big innovation, but can also be, hey, fix the drop-down menu on the website, pick up the trash in the parking lot. Every little thing can make a difference. I'm a big believer in aggregated marginal gains. So we did all that work to get very focused on our mission, vision, and our ways of work. And then what's our theory of change? Like, how do we think we can do it in a really concrete way? So we had some foundational things we had to do. We had to get our data in order. We had to get our tech stack in order. We had to get our foundation and our research capacity up. And so we had a whole family of foundational things. But our main idea was, how do we really adopt and advance next generation education, rapid and whole human support, really understanding the kind of academic, financial, cultural, and familial needs of a student and financial needs of a student. And the idea is next gen education, which is all the progressive strategies that are really advancing the world of education, which might be the use of metaverse, use of virtual reality. It also could just be different learning models like 4 and 8 week
Mhm.
courses, whatever it is. Rapid and whole human support, and then aim it at what we call value rich education. And our idea of value rich education is students, and Ashish, I don't know if you'll buy this, but I completely buy it. I don't think students come to higher education to get a degree. I don't. I think they come to higher education to change their lives. And they see it as a pathway to change their lives. The degree is a means to an end. And now increasingly it also includes certifications and all kinds of other things. So our value proposition, we kind of broke down to, we call it credential rich, connection rich, experience rich, which is, and we really adopted this. Credential rich is help them get the family of credentials that give them the most power, right? Give them, it really is credentials with labor market value, give them more opportunities. They can manage themselves, they can manage their careers. And those credentials can be a family of certifications, degrees, whatever it might be. But we have actually stacked and laddered those credentials into different degree programs and made it part of it. It's been a big belief of mine for a long time. That it's not either or on things like certifications or degrees. It's like there might be a family, and we have a number of our degrees where you basically get kind of behavioral health certification before you get a bachelor's in behavioral health. You get a construction management cert before you get a construction management bachelor's degree. You get a SHRM certification before you get a master's in HR. Like, we're building that in. And then it's connection rich, which I think there's real transformative power in the connections you may help people make in higher ed. Students to
Yeah.
students, students to faculty, and students to the professionals in their space that they're going into. And really, how do you intentionally design that connection work into your higher education experience, even if you're online? And I deeply believe you can do that. And then the third one is experience rich, which is how do you help them with the clinicals, the experiential learning, the project based learning, so they really have that deep, rich experience while they're there. We think that's value rich education, which is going to be different. So we began organizing ourselves. We looked at every single program. We looked at our services. We looked at our practices. Are we adapting next gen education? Do we have the right kind of whole human supports? And let's build our programs with that value rich profile. That's been the work of the last 3 years, and I could not be prouder of this team. They have really leaned in. I can give you example after example on each of those three pillars around that theory of change, and it's been really useful for the university to get that grounding. We're deep in the get real. We're looking at the data about where we're strong and where we need to kind of get improvements, and then we're going like crazy right now. We are on the move.
Love that, Mark. Love the attitude of the team. I mean, I'm working with them for a little bit. I totally understand, and I see that those values are resonating with the team as well. So by the way, I 100% uh, second what you're saying about it. An educational degree being less of what's on paper and more about how's it going to change my life. Absolutely. You know, I always say this about myself. I was so skeptical when I said no to an admit from Yale's MBA program, and I went to Bentley to do my MBA because I said I don't really care about the brand. I care more about how I'm going to add value to what I'm doing, and I actually have zero regrets. So this is awesome. Now, talking about that, let's try another Millianism, which is do fewer things at A level, right? You said it in one of the things I was listening. It was pretty interesting, and one of the things you're trying to do is keep as less level B initiatives as possible, do fewer things, but do it at the highest level possible within your teams, and like while you're building national. How is that working out? Have you sunset a few projects saying, hey, let's just focus? Tell us a little bit about your thought
Yeah,
process.
I mean that is the hard work. It is jokingly my team
Yeah,
calls them Marxisms, which I think is hilarious. But the do more things at the A level, not at the B level. I did not invent. I actually learned that early on from some powerful mentors in my life who really helped me kind of understand, because I was so excited about so many things, and I think in my late 20s I had a really neat board chair at the League for Innovation, big association of community colleges where I was CEO, who basically said, Mark, you've got an idea a minute, you got to take a deep breath, because if you want to actually deliver on the promise of these things, fewer things at the A level, not more things at the B level. And it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. He didn't invent that. Lots of people have been talking about that for decades. But boys, it's useful advice. And I'll just give you a concrete example.
sure.
We really looked at our data at National University to kind of understand all the different student success initiatives. And we were steeped in student success initiatives. National has been busy doing hundreds, literally hundreds of initiatives. And one of the things I said, these all are interesting and important, but the biggest thing for us right now is to get really focused on the biggest need areas that have the best elasticity, which means something we can do something about. I hate to use a stat term, but it's something you can move the needle on. What can we do that will add the most value, that will really help our students in the short term in terms of our support structures? So when we unpack that data, what we picked for national, and it might be different based on different institutional types and where they are, we really saw we had an initiative, we had a growing number of younger students, even though our average age of our undergrad is 33, and we had a growing number of younger students who are really drawn to non-traditional models because they want to work while they're going to school, or they just like learning in that format. And we also just had a lot of students who are entering, again, with very complicated lives, especially at the baccalaureate level. And we found this whole set of students, we call them the new and blue. The new and blue are the newer students who are coming in who just need specific kinds of supports to understand what's my purpose, what's my plan, what's the direction I'm going in, and how do I really like get into this process of going into higher education. And some of it's because they don't have that sense of understanding their belonging, their connectedness. And so that became a big focus area as the new and blue. The second is we really discovered we had a lot of friction in our system that was about bureaucracy, that was just our own systems and processes. And that
Hmm.
was like, we got to get out of these students' way. Like their curriculum should be challenging, not our bureaucracy. So what can we do to kind of fix some of the bureaucracy stuff? And then the last one is we have some some near completer challenges, which is pretty common in higher ed, believe it or not. Students who are like 75% of the way down, but they're not crossing the stage. So what can we do to help change that? So we developed initiatives around all that to drive outreach. And that's been very important for us because we actually got our enrollment teams, our advising teams, our student services, like our dean of students, everybody started collaborating around key initiatives for those three things. And what you saw is in the last year, even at a time of kind of great change, over the last 2.5 years, we just consistently been increasing our persistence rates, decreasing attrition, increasing persistence. And it's been great to see. And this happens because of just intentional effort. And I love the fact that we use a tool called Lost Momentum, by the way, and the Lost Momentum framework looks at students in the connection, entry, progression, and completion phases. And you look at, based on the data, what are your biggest loss points and what are your biggest momentum strategies? What are the things that are really working to help the students? And then from that, you just get to work. You figure out, what do I need to work on that's going to have the biggest impact for the students? And as we do this work, we'll start, cascading that into other kinds of initiatives as we kind of evolve and develop. But it's been great for us just to get focused on those kind of areas. And it was a little lost for some people because they liked all these pet programs. It's like, well, we got to stop some of the pet programs and just dive into this.
I love that. Yeah, it does require a level of rigor to say, yeah, this looks very attractive, but let's just focus and let's kill it for a little bit. I appreciate the way you really think there. I struggle with that all day long as a CEO, like, oh yeah, we're building AI for enrollment, and there's now this new shiny object everybody wants, around automating transcripts or automating something else. But yeah, just being able to focus is a hard but required task. So that's
It's like
awesome.
you can't get to mastery unless you can get to focus on the key things you've got to get better at. So we're
Yeah.
again really proud of our team and kind of their ability to focus on these things. It's also listening to your students. A lot of that work. We have some big indicators of whether we're on track or off track, right? And our board has a complete dashboard around this, so it's from the highest levels all the way down. We're looking at, are we increasing credential count for our students? Are we increasing grad rates, persistence rates? But we're looking at engagement scores, and we've created a version of Nessie that is adaptable to us because of our non-traditional students. And then we look at NPS. Net Promoter Score is a big deal for us because if a student is telling somebody else about how great their experience is, or if an alumni is telling them, then you've won. Like, they've seen value, they're telling other people around it, and it's incredibly important. And then listening on the MPS to see what are they saying on some of the big areas. It's pretty important to. You can't build empathy if you can't listen.
So, Mark, as we conclude, I'd love to plug in the Anders Fund and everything you're doing philanthropically with the NU Foundation. I got an invite, by the way, to the foundation gala. I'm going to be there because mission
Nice.
is really important, and you're helping close sort of that financial barriers that students have, or balancing life's ends. So, talk to us a little bit about the motivation behind the fund and where you intend for that to go in the future.
Yeah, it's really a campaign, Ashish. We are very focused on this idea. The Anders idea has really resonated, by the way. The more we talk about it, the more I have people coming up to me saying, I was an Ander, I know an Ander, I'm married to an Ander, or whatever it is. It's kind of because people really see themselves in it. And it goes to that idea, to serve students, you got to see students, which we're really passionate about. The Ander campaign is really about kind of three big things. One is shining a light on Anders and saying, hey, these students are part of higher education. They belong, they're valuable, they can be wildly successful. You got to design for them, though. You got to be a part of that conversation. And we're actually going to be conducting research on this. We have a series of Anders summits coming up. We literally want to write the book on Anders. And really look at the policies that work for them, the practices that work for them, the partnerships that work for them, and get that conversation going in the larger higher education space. So you're helping in that conversation right now just by doing this. The second thing is we really want to make sure we are doing the work to help people think about how they can support these folks. And that is, thinking about how we fund their education. And that's going to be some of the campaign work we're doing around trying to raise employer tuition assistance and drive that kind of larger work. And that's going to be some deep engagement work, especially on the policy side if we do it well. But the third element is going to be raising dollars to support these students. And that's our philanthropy work we're doing on the Anders Fund. And our goal is to raise about $30 million specifically in scholarships and emergency aid just for this student population. And one of the things we want to do with that is actually research what's the best way you can deploy financial aid, emergency aid, and support to really help these students be successful. So we are inviting people. If you go to nu.edu/Anders, you can find all the information about the Anders campaign and the kind of work we're doing. We even have an Anders anthem. It's a great music video that talks about the Anders, which is really kind of inspirational, really kind of fun. But again, we really want to make a difference. We want to shine a light. We want to change the system, and we want to raise some resources to help these students be more successful. So again, thank you, Ashish, for being willing to shine a light on that with us.
Absolutely, Mark. Yes, I would not end the podcast without that, because it's I think the epitome of what mission is for National and yourself. So really appreciate the work you're doing there. And before we end, one last question for all the Anders out there listening who are commuting to their work, their shifts, or juggling family, bedtime, kids. What's the one small action that they can take this week to move their education forward, even if their life feels really full?
I, you know, I'm a big believer in this concept, and I think it's incredibly important as a catalytic tool for your own development in your own life. I'm a big believer in keeping it simple, and to me, the notion of each one reach one is very powerful. Which is, I think everybody who's on this kind of journey or who has been on this kind of journey, I think take it upon yourself to figure out how you can help another person, another Ander, somebody who's in that kind of space. Not say, well, I don't think I can do it. I don't have the time. I don't have. It's like, no, like anything you can do to inspire them, to help direct them to the right. And again, it doesn't have to be at national. It can be anywhere. If you can inspire another person to get on that pathway to possibility, to finish what they start. Again, there are 43 million adults in this country with some college and no credential. Let's help those folks get back on the path, and let's help them finish what they start. And if you can just help one person, I think that becomes catalytic. And I think there's something about that giving of yourself to inspire somebody else that actually helps you in some ways, because it helps you kind of think about, oh, in the long run, you being successful on your education path is the best symbol for those folks. So we say this all the time at our commencement ceremonies. Everybody crossing the stage today, you are now a symbol of the fact that Anders can be radically successful, and then you have almost the responsibility of each one reach one. So that would be kind of my final admonition.
Love that, Mark. Each one, reach one.
Yeah.
Amazing way to put a blue ribbon around this podcast, and for something that can resonate. If we had to do a short, a YouTube short out of this, we're going to put that in there for sure. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark, for being part of this podcast and sharing with us some inspiring stories of yourself and how you're growing national and the higher ed ecosystem globally. Thank you so much.
Thank you much. Glad to join.
Fantastic. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us on another amazing episode of Edu Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando, and our guest for today, Dr. Mark Milliron, the CEO and president at National University. Thank you so much.